Has been revealed 27 of the foreigners released from indefinite detention were referred to immigration ministers over very serious violent conduct or child sex offences. Documents labelled in the Senate detailed the character reasons detainees had their visas cancelled. The High Court ruled it is unconstitutional to hold people in immigration detention indefinitely was unconstitutional. The opposition have questioned the government's failures to have a legislative fix ready ahead of the court's decision. Former Howard Government Minister Peter McGauran says the release is an indictment of the administration.
Terrible reaction by the government that they immediately freed on the handing down of the High Court decision 82 rapists, pedophiles, murderers, organised crime figures from open-ended detention and another 10 to be released shortly. It's a damning indictment on public administration.
Well, joining me live is Zali Steggall, independent MP for Warringah. Zali, thanks so much for joining us. It certainly was a busy week in Parliament and very late night sitting in the House of Reps with those amendments of the immigration bill passing. What's your take on it?
Look, I think I would have to call out those comments of that previous clip. We have to remember, Australia is a liberal democracy. We have separation of powers between the executive branch and the government and our judiciary. So the High Court has determined, pursuant to our constitution, that it is not the role of government, of politicians, to be punitive, so to incarcerate. And so the High Court has found that indefinite detention of people who have no real prospect of being deported to another country because they are stateless is in fact punitive and so unconstitutional. So I do support that there was no action the government could take other than comply with the court orders. That being said, I think they should have been more on the front foot in terms of information for the public, in acknowledging the situation, but also in what steps were then taken. So there is a difficulty. The High Court reasons are not known yet. So the government doesn't know where the line is drawn between punitive action and appropriate action of the executive government. So it's highly likely the legislation that passed the Parliament on Thursday, some aspects of it may well get struck down as unconstitutional because they cross the line into being punitive. But it is important for community safety and reassurance that appropriate measures are in place. So I supported the bill at first instance in that sense that it requires that mandatory reporting daily, notification of where people are. Now, I should say for people, we had a briefing from the government. Not all of the detainees that are being released are in this category of such severe crime. Many of them had much smaller offences. And we are talking about people that were in the community, committed crimes, served a custodial sentence, and were then put into detention with the view of being deported. But unfortunately, the government never acted on deporting them. So I think we need to be careful not to whip up a frenzy, but to respect the role of the High Court and really look to what is, on the balance, the appropriate protections for the community versus respecting the rule of law.
And what do you make of the new laws where they have strict curfews, ankle monitoring devices, for example?
Look, they are very strict. I am concerned there's been a bit of knee-jerk from the government because the opposition whipped up a frenzy of outrage, really putting into question the importance of respecting the High Court decision and where they say the constitutional power lies for the executive government. But that being said, there's no doubt these measures that have been put in place, I think, are good from a temporary point of view to deal with the situation pending the reasons for the High Court being available. And we will then need to reassess where the line is drawn. Of course, where laws are broken, there are custodial sentences and crimes and punishment that result. But we don't want to have a situation of two classes of criminal justice system in Australia. For Australian-born or Australian residents, they go through our justice system, and then we have stateless refugees dealt with a different system. It is a dangerous precedent.
All right, we're running out of time, but I want to ask you two more topics. First of all, Stop the Lies Bill, which you introduced to Parliament on stopping lies in political advertising. What's the main aim, and bring us up to speed on how it's going?
Well, the main aim is to bring political advertising and politicians into line with consumer advertising so that we have the same standards whereby you can't have misleading and deceptive statements or incomplete statements in political advertising. Most people take issue with the idea that politicians can lie in their political advertising. So, having those discussions with the government, I think it's really important that we bring in this legislation, bring political standards up to consumer standards and what we expect for everybody else in Australia. The government, I think, has an opportunity here to do it. And what's great is all voters of all persuasions support this. And if I look at the referendum results, both yes and no voters supported this as well.
And renewables, you've been vocal on what you claim are misleading and deceptive claims about offshore wind farms off the New South Wales coast, which could cause the death of hundreds of whales.
Well, I take issue with that advertising because it is not based on any fact. There has been no scientific research or data to suggest that offshore wind is responsible for any kind of death of whales, right? So I absolutely respect communities can have a view about whether they want this form of technology, and then they need to weigh it up with the consequences. If they don't embrace it, it may well have an impact for industry and jobs in their region. They have to acknowledge that. But I think decisions need to be made on fact, not scare campaigns. And this is misleading. There simply is no data or scientific research that supports that offshore wind is responsible for whale deaths.